Hello, welcome to this week's edition of the Turning Points podcast. This week, we had the honor and pleasure of speaking to Marty Birrittella, who is a engineer, not by trade, by education, businessman, author, and just all-around beautiful spiritual individual. Man, you got to really listen to this one.
Yeah, I love Marty. It was a pleasure to have him on. He's got some good stories.
Yeah.
He's very mystical, which I personally love. Don on the other hand was very, not spiritual specifically, and yet it was, as far as I'm concerned. But Marty's like super mystical, spiritual. Love him. So yeah, enjoy this.
Hey, Marty, welcome to the podcast, man. How are you?
I'm good.
Cool, man. Well, we'll dive right into this thing. So the biggest question, really the big question of the podcast, is obviously it's called Turning Points. So we focus on turning points or time periods in somebody's life, your life particularly, where you became a spiritual seeker, or you realized that your childhood beliefs or your program beliefs were no longer serving you in life, in your family life, kind of whatever. So do you recall a turning point moment in your early childhood?
I don't think the funny thing is my aunt was a nun, and from the time my mom would say from the time I was in the second grade or 7 years old, I kept on saying I wanted to become a priest. And by the time I was 14 years old, for my freshman year in high school, I went to a junior Carmelite seminary, went away. And, I was pretty sort of hooked into wanting to totally connect with really more, I think, the rituals in the church. I love being in this old Gothic church, which was what I grew up in. And, it was just fun being in there. It was fun being an altar boy. It was fun. The whole thing was sort of really juicy for me. And that's really my initial experience of that. My parents made me drop out of that seminary when I was a sophomore. That's a whole other story, but I dropped out. Then I became like a normal, high school kid playing all three sports and was a president of my class in my junior year at high school. And then when I went off to college, I think taking drugs, LSD, mescaline and stuff at that point was really the thing that all of a sudden made me look at reality differently. So, it's like probably many kids at that time, it was like 1972, 50 years ago, I was going like, wow, something else is happening here that I want to take a look at. But obviously the root part of me really wanted to connect with that. Obviously, since I was a little kid and was in the seminary, I really wanted to see, more intensely have an experience of what was really going on.
Now that it's very interesting that a lot of people that we've spoken to have the reverse, where their family was causing them to go to, whatever religion they were a part of, Christianity or Catholicism. And then at some point, the child made a decision, or, teenager or into college decided to kind of abandon that belief structure. You were actually more into it than it sounds like your family was. And your family asked you to leave or made you leave. I'd love to hear that story about why.
Well, I'll tell you exactly what happened. I was there, and there was only 50 kids in that school. And one of the upperclassmen, I think there was only 6 juniors. This individual ended up falling in love with me and had written a love letter to me, after I left school my freshman year, and my mother intercepted that letter. And I never knew this for many years until I was married. Many years later, my mom told me that she had gotten this letter and read it, and she goes, "Oh my God." She went to my dad and said, we can't let him go back. If he wants to be a priest, he has to wait until he's 18. So I cried. I was totally sort of devastated that I couldn't go back, but I surrendered to the fact that, okay, fine, let's see what ends up happening. But then I went into a normal high school. And everything changed for me at that point. And I never obviously had the underlying desire to connect with it, but it didn't happen with, one of the things I always like to say at that period of time is, since we went to mass every morning at 6:00 and there was a giant crucifix of Jesus on the cross above the thing. And I always, sitting there as a kid, looking up at that in the seminary, wanted him to come down off of that cross and embrace me in some form. And the reality was, I knew that was never going to happen, as much as I wanted it to happen. But I think that was sort of a fantasy of mine, sitting in that church pew all the time.
That's actually really beautiful.
Yeah.
And so that almost feels a little mystical to me, and that maybe you had some tendencies towards that. And then, so how did that change when you started to experiment with some of the hallucinogenic and drugs and things like that? Did that change the way you looked at spirituality?
No, not really. I think that, so many kids my age at that time, I was in Cornell Engineering School, and I can remember in my dormitory, the dormitory next to me, it's like kids were doing so much LSD that they couldn't even get off on it. And I dropped out of engineering school, and I worked as a construction worker. And during that period of time when I was a construction worker, I did LSD, mescaline a few times, but then I got laid off in the wintertime. It was in upstate New York, total snow. I got laid off, and I started doing yoga for the first time. I bought the complete illustrated book of yoga. I forget who that's by. It's like an orange, old book. And I was only doing hatha yoga for, I think, 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And I had an incredible out-of-body experience. And that totally changed my perception of reality as I saw, because I knew I wasn't my body. At that point in time, it was very blissful. I was totally out of it, and I ended up reading Yogananda's Autobiography of Yoga 2 months after that. Completely stopped doing hatha yoga altogether. I only did it 4 weeks of my life. Then moved right on to Yogananda's type stuff, and then it wasn't even a year after that I had my a really powerful Kundalini experience, which totally not only rocked my world, but sort of set my mindset for the next 50 years, almost 50 years ago. So. Okay,
so tell us about that. That's a pretty big turning point. We want to hear all about that.
Yeah.
So I was, I moved from Albany because my high school friends were living in Gainesville, Florida. So they said, you got to go back to school. You can't my parents wouldn't pay for me to go to school after I dropped out of Cornell. So I said, well, how am I going to afford this? And they said, you can go to community college in Gainesville, Florida. So it's like, okay, great. I'm coming down there. I flew down there and visited them in that winter. They convinced me to move down there, but they were big into Yogananda and were doing all the self-realization fellowship lessons at the time. So by the time I got down there, like in the summertime, I started doing those lessons, but they were like a year ahead of me. And I just desperately I was so into wanting to have those experiences in Autobiography of Yogi that I couldn't get those lessons fast enough. And one Saturday, I walked into a bookstore in Gainesville, and the book that I picked up was called Guru, which was Muktananda's book, which is now called The Play of Consciousness. Initially, it was called Guru. I picked up that book and took it home. And it's all about his experience, his spiritual autobiography of his relationship with his guru, Nityananda. And I just devoured that book overnight. And the next morning, I had so much energy in my body that I said, I had my little altar set up because I was into Yogananda. So I sat down in front of that, and I had pictures of Jesus and Yukteswar, and I was meditating intensely the way I would normally meditate with them, and nothing was happening. I was so frustrated. I got up, had to go for a 2-mile walk, came back inside again. I sat down, tried to concentrate, come on, man, send me into some sort of state. Nothing would happen. And so I was, really frustrated. I went into my kitchen. I think I drank a quart of milk with a big loaf of bread and tons of peanut butter. And after I did that, I was just sitting on my couch. I wasn't sitting yoga. I just was, well, it chilled me out eating that food. I sat down on the couch. And as I was sitting there, I was looking at this picture of Muktananda on the back of this book. And my feet started to heat up. And, it was January, February, something like that. Cold air was coming in under the door, and sort of like, you always get cold feet, but it was like really weird to all of a sudden experience your feet getting super hot. And they got hot, and that heat started to slowly spread up my calves into my knees. And it, maybe it took 15 or 20 minutes to get up there, and then took another 5 or 10 minutes to get up to my waist. And when it got there, I noticed that I was breathing in my left nostril and breathing out my right nostril. Completely, something was doing something to me. It was like, and wherever the heat left, I lost all body. So it was like my consciousness was contracting, leaving my legs and my feet. And as I sat there, I started doing these anal contractions, completely spontaneous, where whenever I breathed in, I could feel this contraction and feel like a little teeny bit of energy moving up. And when I would exhale, I would go back out. And the sound of the mantra that Muktananda used with Nityananda was Guru Om. And I started hearing this mantra in my head. Whenever I inhaled, Guru came in my left nostril, and Om. And that whole thing became coordinated with this energy that started to contract. Every time I breathed in, it would contract and move up my spinal lip, and then I relax and go back down. Up, down, up, down. Literally, it felt like the energy was having sex with my body. And I think it probably took maybe 20 or 30 minutes. I kept on doing this, kept on going up higher and higher, and it hit my heart. And when it got to the heart level, the way I can describe that is this feeling of love was like so overwhelming. I know the one thought that I have at that point was, oh my God, this is what love really is. And it was incredibly intoxicating. I mean, beyond sort of intoxicating. And I sat there and basked in it probably for like 10 minutes. The mantra stopped, the breathing sort of settled down. And I thought that was the end of the experience. But as soon as I calmed down a little bit, the breathing started up again. A surprise to me. And I realized that it had moved past my heart. And whenever I breathed in, it would go from the base of my spine. I got up a little bit higher. And it probably took like another 10 minutes, and it finally hit my throat, in which I had no idea what that was. My throat chakra at that point in time. It hit my throat, and the way I describe that is walking into a house of mirrors at an amusement park, because my eyes during this whole thing were wide open, and it seemed like I was everything. I was all the objects in the room. There was like no sense of any separation. It was sort of like I was everything. I became everything. And of course, at that moment, I was like, whoa, sort of, there was a silent part of my mind that was kind of going like, whoa, looking at it, although the sensation of it was sort of overwhelming, and I couldn't feel my body from my neck down, except for this energy that would come in with every breath and the sound of Guru Om, and then go back down again. It was like it was like an intoxicating thing that just picked up. And then I thought that was the end of it. And then the way I can describe the sensation next was the energy wanted to break through the palate of the roof of my mouth. And it felt like the pressure of putting what would you say? A broom handle, inside your mouth. And pressing it up on the roof of your mouth, or the energy was like that intense. It was trying to break through the roof of my mouth. Then my eyes became very centered on my third eye area, with my eyes were wide open. They were just so riveting. I mean, the energy had so consumed and taken over my body that I couldn't take this focus off of my forehead or my third eye. And probably lasted there for like another 10, 15, well, probably like 2 hours into this experience at this point. But I was like in for like a total ride. And the culmination of it was then my eyes rolled up inside my head, and I'm looking up into this field of what would seem like blue light. I was looking at this bluish purplish light, and it just got, every breath, it just got more and more intense, to the, like, you feel like you're about to orgasm, like very similar to a physical orgasm. And the only way I can describe it is as if the roof of the house had blown off and 1,000,000 volts of electricity hit my head, hit my brain, and went through my body. And the bliss for 10 seconds was like, I would always describe it as, I used to describe it as, people would laugh when I would say this, was like as if every pore in your body was a vagina that was contracting, 1,000,000 of them at once. And women would always question me and say, well, how would you know what that feels like? You don't have one. And then it's funny, like a number of years ago, I was reading Ramakrishna, and he was talking about Chaitanya, and Chaitanya, who was a 15th century saint, used to describe the experience as if every hair became a sexual organ. So it was like, I basically was saying the female version of the male version of that, but the intensity of that experience was so overwhelming that scared. I threw myself off the couch. I literally flew myself off the couch and landed on the floor. My head just started to pound. The first thought that came to me is like, if this is yoga, I don't want to have anything to do with it. This will kill you. This will kill you. Because my fear at that point was the thoughts, right when I tried to stop it, was, I'm leaving my body. I am leaving my body, and that moment forever changed my life, because I knew that what was ever going to happen or unfold for me, since that happened so spontaneously, was all just going to just happen perfectly the way that it should. I really didn't have to effort that much, other than sort of being a good listener. And what am I supposed to do next? And that was my thought at that point.
Man, that sounds like a very slow, almost like a DMT trip. That's kind of a slow down version. 15 seconds with the DMT trip is what they say. Right. But you're saying 2 hours of that slow build. How old were you about when that happened?
20.
If you don't mind. 20? Oh, wow. So I have about 15 questions. I'm gonna narrow it down to 2. Okay. First off, how much yoga and meditation had you done prior to that to be able to maintain focus and awareness during that whole 2 hours of process?
Well, I was doing Yogananda's SRF lessons, where you basically charge your body, like contract the muscle part for a second and then let it go. That's the only thing at that particular point in time. The only point I was only into the lessons for like 2 or 3 months when I had that experience. So that was my only thing that I had been doing. And the reality was that everything that happened to me during that thing was completely, I made absolutely zero effort on trying to focus any attention whatsoever. There was this was as if somebody injected you and it took over your body, and it just started at the bottom of your feet and went to your head over a 2.5 hour period of time and opened up all those chakras. It was like no effort whatsoever.
So it was so incredibly attractive that it drew your attention to it. There was no not having your attention.
It was as strong as if I walked into the room there and I picked you up and lifted you up and put you against the wall. All right. Okay. That was the power of which it was. But there was no reason for me to sort of resist it or fight it, because the whole thing was like felt so good. was so, every breath was so intoxicating. It was sort of like, oh my God, I'm going to get, oh, you know.
Gotcha.
You
Okay.
know.
So it was not something like, well, I better stay focused on this. It was
no,
okay.
Nothing like that.
So then at the time you said the fear was that you were going to leave your body and that this was going to kill you.
7 seconds into that electrocution of bliss, the thought was, oh my God, I'm leaving my body. That's the thing that made me throw myself off the couch, trying to save my life.
Now, this day and age, Marty, do you wish you had left your body? Do you have any thoughts about what it would have been like if you would have surrendered completely, or?
Well, yeah, you probably know who Byron Katie is. I don't know if you.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was a good friend with Byron with Katie, and we would joke about this thing. And she goes, the only difference between me and you is sort of like I died and you didn't.
Gotcha.
And would I go back there and now I can say in all honesty, I've gone into that state in a dream state, and they'll like wake me up in the middle of the night where it's that intense and that blissful, but in the waking state, your body, your brain basically wants to protect itself, so it's trying like putting somebody's head underwater. It's sort of like you think you basically want it, but there's something inside you that says, no, you really don't want it. So
it was almost like it's not, it was a self-preservation reaction.
And it's even self-preservation. It's even self-preservation today. Self-preservation today. It's sort of like, one of the things funny, Dostoevsky, who wrote Crime and Punishment, he was an epileptic, and, a number of times before he'd go into having a grand mal seizure, he'd have an aura, and where this complete brain is completely firing, and it was incredibly blissful. And he would say that, I seriously would, to have the experience of that again for 10 seconds. Interesting, because he says 10 seconds. I would give up my life to feel that for 10 seconds. And that's the only way that I can describe, because people want to say, well, what's that like? What's like Nirvikalpa Samadhi? What does that feel like? It's sort of like so indescribable and so blissful. It's like, but I love the words of him saying, like, I would actually give up my life to feel that for 10 seconds. So it's what it's like.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it's terrifyingly blissful.
Yeah, terrifyingly. And and it's interesting that you say DMT, because you see the people who have those DMT breakthroughs. Rick Strassman's book, and some of the people that have had those experiences, and they're just by it's crazy to think that you can inject a chemical right into your body and then throw somebody into that state that will last for a very short period of time, and they'll come back out of it and go like, wow, wow. So.
Well, and Corinne and I have had our psychedelic experiences, and I think I'm very thankful, and I think Corinne's been very thankful for her experiences. And the last one that we had actually together, Corinne at the end of it was, I don't remember where this comes from, but awareness trumps drugs all the time. It sounds like you've had a very similar experience where, yes, these psychedelics, they can help you glimpse the other side, or glimpse another world, or glimpse a reality that is deeper or bigger, or whatever your words are to describe it. But there's a spiritual practice that if you embark on that spiritual practice, it will take you, it'll bring that other reality into this reality. How does that sound to you?
Well, I think it's correct. I mean, even in the Yoga Sutras, I think the first stanza of the last chapters, 4 chapters, like 200 sutras in total. I think the very first stanza in that last one, basically, Patanjali says that one of the ways you can achieve this state is through drugs. That's me paraphrasing it, but that's one of the things that you can do. So I think people's use of that to give them a glimpse of what it's like. But I'm totally, my sort of feeling about life at this particular point in time is my only measuring stick for myself is the depth and the duration of the love, peace, bliss that I can experience. Sort of like I totally crave that experience that I have. And I believe that it's possible to have that many, many times, just freed up enough, or you burned up enough of your karma or your destiny that you're so freed up that you allow yourself to totally let go and do that. I think one of the things since you're so familiar with Ramana Maharshi, it's like, Ramana basically said, he went into Nirvikalpa Samadhi at least 1,000 times. And you don't get that at all because his teaching is so non-trying to do that. But as he was sitting there for those 6 years that he was young, from 16 to 22, he was just silent, sitting up on the mountain, or he was like down in the temple going into Samadhi. But he recognized that whenever he come out, that his mind was still active. He was thinking. He was like, what the hell is going on? What's going on? So he was really sort of looked at saying, like, this state must be accessible, whether you're near a Nirvikalpa or you're just in a complete waking state. And all the emphasis for him at that particular, he became sort of like, kind of came down and became more and more kind of bodily conscious and stayed in that, say, what he would call Sahaj Samadhi, with his eyes wide open, sitting down in the bottom of the hill. And his mother, who he didn't pay attention to very much in the beginning, now has a temple at the bottom of the hill, and he's sitting there and hanging out with her, which is almost like a full loop or circle of going from completely transcendent, leaving the body, to being totally in it, but being in a completely transcendent state, which is blissful at the same time as your eyes are basically open, you're conversing or whatever you're doing, which is what he was doing all the time. And obviously his emphasis was always, where did I thought every question that people always asking him about Samadhi all the time, right? He'd be sitting there, people always wanted to, like, no, how do you do that? Can I get that? And he'd be saying, like, don't waste your time with that. But I was like, don't waste your time with that. That's not the final thing. So he's always trying to get people to jump ahead to the sort of the final experience. But it's sort of like, easy for you to say you went into Samadhi 1,000 times. Like, send me in there 10 or 15 times, and I'll basically, go for the ultimate thing. So I always like to joke about that.
They call it bliss envy, I think. Krishna Das tells a story of him being in India, and there was a guy that hung out with Neem Karoli Baba quite a bit as well. And this was after he passed, and Krishna Das was there visiting near the ashram where they would all be together with their guru. And this guy it was somebody close to him, like a neighbor that saw him all the time. And so he was in the middle of a conversation with Krishna Das, and all of a sudden he goes into Samadhi. And he's like in this like frozen state for like the next like 8 hours. And Krishna Das is like, geez, I've been chanting and meditating all these years, and this guy's just like in the middle of a sentence and just like goes into it spontaneously.
Yeah. So
okay. So what happened after that?
Well, this is it. This is kind of, I was terrified. Honestly, I was terrified at that particular point in time. I wouldn't even meditate. I wouldn't sit down at the altar, which I had a little altar in my bed. I would say, like, I'm not going to meditate, because I didn't know it at any particular time. It could just grab me and basically do the same thing. And this time I might not come back out. So I didn't want to do that. And I ended up buying a small little book that Muktananda had, since, he was alive. He's living in India. Muktananda wasn't in the United States. So I decided, I want to read something else this guy's written. So he had written this little book, So Hum Japa, which is a simple, like, hum sa, hum so hum, basically same type of thing. It's like, it's a mantra you can do, walking, talking, eating, sleeping, wherever you are, 24 hours a day, you just, breathe in, so exhale, hum. And, it's basically he, am I. It's like, being Shiva all the time. And that sounded safe to me. That sounded like I'm not going to sit here and do Guru Om and basically blow my head off, so I'll try. Maybe this is a better thing for me. So I ended up, I read that, it's a tiny little book, I don't know, maybe like 20 pages long or something. And I said, on a Saturday, I said, I'm going to commit to, like, for 3 hours, I'm going to do Soham. I'm going to see what that's like. And I started doing that. So on the inhale, I hum out. So, and then after 3 hours, this was not my plan, but I couldn't stop it. I literally could not stop it. And it went on like that for 6 weeks, nonstop.
Wow.
And you try to listen to your breath. Now you listen to your breath. You can see if you can have breath awareness and hold that for, 5 minutes, hold that for, can you imagine that it's like every single, but the reason that I could do it was at every inhale, there was like a release. I almost like say it's like a release of dopamine or something, like a dopamine drip coming from the center of my brain that would just sort of lightly flow into my body. So it's like you're sort of like and I wasn't really doing Soham as much as like I was just aware of every breath. Every part of breathing in was like igniting the midbrain and doing some sort of, people would say, okay, it's Soma or something else. I literally think that it's actually brain chemistry that was happening. And, I was working for the University of Florida Department of Vegetable Crops at the time, and I was analyzing nitrogen in watermelon leaves. So I had a laboratory set up, and I would be boiling watermelon leaves in a test tube and getting the nitrogen gas to come off of, would run through the machine, and it would give me a reading, all right, of how much was there. But I was like sitting there cross-legged on a stool in a lab, and I turn on the Bunsen burner, and it'd be heating it for like 2 minutes. I got to make sure don't burn it. And whenever I turn the thing on, my eyes would roll up in my head, and I'd be looking in this field of light, and I could basically come back out of it in time to like turn off the burner, and then get the reading. But it's like every single breath was totally, just, it's like you're on some sort of drug that is super wonderful, but not overwhelming. And that went on like that for 6 weeks until I ended up having sex with this girl who was worked in a clothing store, which I happened to walk into. It was like next to the store. And she said, "Hey, you want to come over my house?" And I don't even know. I never met this girl at all. Like I'm breathing. It's like I'm just going with the flow. It's like sure. And I ended up going over to her house, and after the meal, I was so totally detached. It's sort of like I couldn't even really have sex at that moment, and she was like determined, and she was determined. And it's sort of like the crazy thing was that eventually I ended up having an orgasm, but had no sensation. Ejaculating, no sensation at all, and it was like that concerned me. Seriously, it concerned me. I went home and I said, "Oh my God, I don't think I can really have an orgasm anymore." So I like masturbated, the next day to see if it actually would work, and I have a sensation. And the minute that I came from that time, all of a sudden the experience of my breathing and Soham and everything completely went away. It stopped.
Wow.
It completely stopped. My mind became very active. I tried to get it back. I tried to breathe. I want to go back and feel that again. I couldn't. It's sort of like my brain chemistry completely flipped. Something happened inside my brain at that point. And the way I like to describe it sometimes is like playing that game of chutes and ladders, is that for some reason, my destiny for me was in the very beginning, I hit that ladder that took me all the way to the top, like moves away from ending the game. And then my next move was I hit the chute and I went all the way down. I said it took me like a couple of weeks to go all the way to the top. And then in a minute now, basically went all the way down to the bottom. It's taken me 30 years to go on that stupid board, all the way up there. It's kind of like what it was like, but, and wow, talk about beating yourself up. I totally was like devastated. I sort of really thought I totally screwed up massively at that point in time after that. So, and my life went on like a somewhat normal.
Well, and that's what's interesting is, what's the more effective way of being in life? Is it more effective or less effective to be in that state that you were in, that almost to the end of the board game state? Mm-hmm. Or is it more effective to be in the normal state? Or is it all a lesson? Is it about having both? What's your take on it?
About having both. I think it's about having. I was like leading silent meditations. I live in Santa Barbara now, but I was living in Sedona for many years. But for like 4 years, I was like doing silent meditations twice a day, and it's like I'd say having the total experience of life. 100% of in the body, feeling it. I think you can have it all. I mean, honestly, if anybody were to get anything out of this, I'd say you can basically have it all. But the most important thing, which I would say to people who would come and meditate, more than anything else, you got to be really kind and loving to yourself all the time. There's no reason to never be, mean or whatever, forget about other people, just to yourself. Just be kind and loving continuously as much as you possibly can to yourself. And you have the internal desire to have whatever the experience is that you want, just keep having it and doing whatever exercises you think is going to work for you. If you basically keep on doing that, eventually you're going to get there. Let's face it, it's like everything that you see, source is manifested. You're looking at your body, you're looking at the stars, you're looking at something, whatever you want to call that, universe, source, God has manifested. Nobody would question that. There's like, I don't know what did it, but something here has manifested this. And the other thing, it's also animating it. There's no doubt that thing is also animating, and it's animating everything. It's animating your physical body, the physical universe movements. I think it's basically manifesting your thoughts, your emotions, and everything else. And you look at Ramana or somebody else, and he basically, how do you get enlightened? He goes 2 ways. You can either do inquiry or you can surrender. And he basically says they're both the same. And the reality, surrender is basically, this whole thing is just playing out. This thing is just playing out. Just surrender to it. And I say just surrender to it and be kind to yourself, and whatever impulse you have to sort of enhance your experience, to go for it. Whatever that looks like. Whatever in crazy, intense tapasya you want to do. You want to, crawl, 20 miles to a temple in India on the ground and not eat any food or something. If that's what's going to do for you, do that. Or if you want to do DMT, do that, whatever. But just have that underlying desire. It's like one of the most powerful things you can have. But no matter what, be sweet and kind to yourself as you're going through the process. Don't judge yourself. So
beautiful. I love that. That is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but I want to go back now. So after then you're still like 20 years old. You've had all these experiences. Now it's gone. Now there's nothing. Then
right.
What?
Yeah. So it's sort of like then what ended up happening was I had a dream, and in that dream, Muktananda came to me in Gainesville. He was in India at the time, and I was, in a street in Gainesville with a bunch of people, and he was there. He walked up to me, touched my third eye, and I flew off into the sky. And as soon as I had that experience, it's like, this guy's coming to Gainesville. I'm getting the hell out of here because he'll kill me. This is my thought. He's going to kill me. So I left Gainesville and I went back to New York. And sure enough, he ended up coming to Gainesville, as crazy as that sounds. You know, he came to Gainesville and I was in New York, and I had a devastating experience with my high school girlfriend where she was in college. She had gotten pregnant, and I hadn't even talked to her in a couple of years. I was back there, and anyway, it was. I write about it in my book. All right, and
you can say
really
whatever you want.
What's that?
You can say whatever you want on the podcast. No filters.
Yeah, no filters.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm not going to say exactly. It had nothing to do with me. I only even saw her for like a couple of days, and I helped her do something when the net result of that thing was extremely painful for me. It was like so painful that I said that was the thing that really motivated me to go, okay, guess what? Muktananda's in California. It's time for you to get on a plane and go out there and, basically surrender to the Guru, which is sort of like his main theme. That's, City Yoga, Muktananda is all about. It's all about surrender in the Guru Gita. And, you don't do it the right way, you'll be born again in a waterless jungle. Nobody wants that. So, I moved out there and I ended up moving into the ashram, and there was the funny thing about that is some of these people's kundalinis were getting awakened by him, it's like a nightly program. There were like 300 or 400 people in there in Oakland. And it was like it was kind of like a wild scene with seeing so many people having visible kundalini experiences, but I felt none of it. I felt no sort of shakti, as they would say. It's like I already had all my experiences. Now it's kind of like just time for me to do the dirty work, like do the dishes type of thing. I was like into that stage at that point in my life. So I lived there for maybe 6 or 7 months, and this girl walked into the juice bar that I was working. It was like a little tiny juice bar, which was part of the ashram called Amrit. And she walked in there, and I was really attracted to her. And I was sitting in the meditation hall during the evening program 2 nights later, and she was in the darshan line with flowers or something, and this voice came to me and said, "Go ask her to marry you." And this is crazy. This is like insane. This is like totally insane. And I'm like in pajamas. I'm like sitting there like in sort of pajamas on the floor. I'm going, no, I'm not doing that. But the funny feeling, and the feeling in my heart was like, yes, do it. Yes, do it. It's like it felt good. It's like no. And I sort of had this argument with me probably for like 2 minutes, because she was standing there and the line was moving up. And I said, fuck, I'm going to do it. So I got up and walked up to her and I said, "Will you marry me?" And she said to me, she goes, "Yes." I said, I'm going to ask Baba Muktananda. I'm going to ask Baba right now. We get to the front. And she was like, okay. And we went to, it was probably like, 40 people in front of us. We got down to the front of the line. And there was an Indian Swami who was the translator. And we both got down in front of him with his peacock feathers. He's sitting everybody with his peacock feathers. And I say to him, I want to ask Baba's permission to get married to this girl. And as I'm saying it to the Indian Swami who's going to translate it, he starts yelling to the Swami, says, "These two get married the next wedding. These two get married the next wedding," which was like in 2 weeks. And that basically, was supposed to get married on Christmas Day, but they because of the astrologers, postponed this mass wedding of 16 couples until January 1st. So we ended up getting married on January 1st. And I had only obviously asked her 3 days after I met her, and we got married 3 weeks later. We were married for 15 years.
Holy shit, man.
Yeah. So, and
that shut Sean up. These kind of things shut Shut him up.
Oh, it's just
You just give him a minute to take that one.
You have to realize it's like, since from the experiences I had, all right?
Yeah.
I had when I sort of feel that something's happening, that I should do something or not do something, it's sort of like, if all of a sudden my heart is sort of opening and saying like, go with this, I have such trust for this is going to be good for me. It's not going to hurt me. I don't know what it's going to endly feel like, but there was like no mental resistance. It was almost sort of like a desire to like, move towards this decision instantaneously. And it's sort of like, I did it,
And why it shuts me up, it shuts me up because it's a smack in the face. You would think it's hard to believe that could happen to somebody. That measure of influence from a force beyond your understanding that guides you to do something.
Yeah.
It's not, you would think that'd be hard to understand. That's not what hangs me up. What hangs me up is I have struggled the most in my life when I don't follow those gravity pushes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's both inspiring to hear a story where somebody's like, yeah, I'm not in control. So something moved me to do this. And the fact that you actually listened is why I'm having this reaction, because I have a lot of communication with that spiritual nature that guides us. I have a very good communication with that gravity, but I have a poor relationship on my part for listening to that gravity. So it's difficult, and I think a lot of people can relate to this. I've even developed a trusting relationship with that gravity. Mm-hmm. And yet there is still a lot of fear to listen to even the trust and to go with that and surrender to that flow. So when I hear that profound moment, it's like, damn, that's the most real thing we can talk about, I guess.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, it's like my wanting to go into a nirvikalpa samadhi. It's sort of like, there's a part of me that says, yeah, you can do it, but then there's another part of me that's holds back to like, wow, what is this totally going to look like if I totally let go,
Yeah.
And this is the same for you. It's like, what if I just totally let go into that gravity of the sensation of this? Where is that going to take me? So there's this sort of the protective element of the, mind body or the brain, which basically can process all that information very rapidly and make a snap decision and say, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
Well, yes, I'm going to jump.
Yeah. Well, and it feels like if I look over my spiritual life, what I have now is a culmination of kind of surrendering, almost surrendering all the time. And I've not had the near death feeling of surrender. I have a pretty melancholy. I have had very big experiences for sure, but nothing that at the end of it I feel very open. I haven't had that same experience where like at the end of a big Kundalini experience, this massive fear of like, no, this is going to kill me. I haven't had those. It's been kind of a different experience, but and this is why I think it's very important to hear you say, be kind and be forgiving with yourself. This has been somewhat of a recurring theme on a couple different conversations, because I moved to having a guilt of, man, I regret not surrendering at that point, or I regret not surrendering. And like you're saying is, no, don't judge yourself in that moment. Don't. Wow. And Corinne has been a huge advocate for me in this way of, it's okay. It's okay that you didn't, and you can't dwell on that past experience. Just keep going with the flow and learning how to trust with that more, and learning how to surrender to that more as that, experience comes up for you.
I think the other thing that I've found over the last 50 years too is that the spiritual practices that you get into, that you think are going to help you, I think do help you a lot. But I think one of the things that Yogananda's Guru Yukteswar would say is whatever heart's desires you have, you basically need to experience those things in order for yourself to go into a higher state. And sort of, I think that so many of us try to negate sort of embracing what those desires happen to be and allow ourselves to fully experience those things. And I think it's very, very helpful to allow yourself to go ahead and do that. And I think what ends up, the other way that shows up a lot is with so many of these spiritual teachers and gurus that are out there. And it's almost like every single male guru that's out there, for the most part, ends up getting into some sort of trouble in their later lives because, people want to judge them like, that guy schmuck, it's like Muktananda, Satchidananda, Osho, whoever, basically they want to name, they have a latent desire that was always there that needs to be fulfilled. So, after all, if this is source that's manifesting everything and animating everything, why wouldn't it not want to fulfill itself and have a total 100% experience of everything it wants before it moves on to a even more total, blissful, or whatever you want to call, transcendent experience that ends up, being however it looks like in the very end, wherever you think you end up going or becoming or, being, just pure beings. But I think that you need to allow yourself to, and I could say from my own experience of sort of shutting that down for so much because you believe, you're looking at all these yogis in India doing the things that they're doing. It's like, that's what's going to get them there. And there's so few people who are reporting that they've gotten there or that they can share if you've really had the experience of getting there, it's like me, I can share those experiences. I'm not saying it because it's meaningful to me or I've achieved something. I think those things just ended up happening because they were supposed to happen to me. But it's sort of, I think it's what do they say? It's like, okay, for 1 million people who desire a connection with God, for every one 1 million people, only one wants it. And out of those million, only one ends up getting to be enlightened, so to speak. And I think that's a horrible, way to look at. I have a much more positive attitude saying that, you can do this, you can do this. And I think with the help of, going forward with brain science and drugs and everything else, I think people are going to end up it's going to be a lot easier to get a lot closer to it and have a fulfilling experience of it, however that's going to look. I don't know what it's going to look like in 50, 100, 200, 300. Look where we're going right now with, the brain. It's like, man, you're going to have everything you want. There's no doubt about that, so.
That's great. That's one of my favorite lessons that I learned from Deepak and that I've actually understood at different levels over the years is, he used to say, fulfill all of your desires until your only desire is for God.
Yeah.
And I've understood that in 10 different ways over the last 25 years and totally wholeheartedly, agree. Whatever you want to do, you have to follow that gravity and follow the heart. There's nothing else to do. Okay, so next, where did we leave off? Okay, so after you got married, and this is the same woman you had 2 kids with, right?
That's correct. Yep.
That's correct. And sort of, does this make a good segue into how you started your businesses, or is there something before that?
No, I think it's probably, well, we lived in an ashram there for a number of years, and then it was sort of like, okay, we have to go out and make money and live in the world. And we ended up started a women's athletic footwear company from scratch, which was like a miracle. We had no money, nothing, and took that company public in 1988. And people say, well, how the hell did you do that? And that way I just go back. I was just like a good listener. I was just like, what do I do next? Literally sitting there meditating. It's like, call up the U.S. ski team and tell me you want to be the official training shoes of the U.S. ski team. And that's just one example of, no money in the bank. And that company ended up going public. And after that company went public, we ended up getting separated and divorced because the first time in our lives we had like a lot of money. We had a lot of money, and then it's like, okay, well, I got to do another company. So then I took a second company public, and if people like listen to how I actually took these companies, started them from scratch, and took them public, they would be like, "You have to be kidding me!" And I can say that I was a good listener or what I should do, but more than anything else, that initial Kundalini experience of going into Nirvikalpa Samadhi was so pivotal in my life that I just like focused. All I wanted to do is go back there. It's like I didn't want to make money. I just basically wanted time that I can meditate. What do I need to do to make that happen? And I knew to make that happen, what I would need is time. So what do I have to do to create time? I have to make enough money. It's like, how do I do that? And I just listened. It's like meditating. Well, what do I do? And the one thing came to the next. And, that was, I retired 25 years ago. I was able to retire 25 years ago. And, thought for 25 years, okay, I'm going to basically, and you know what? Just because you retired 25 years ago and you focus all your time and attention, you think that you can will it into making it happen, and you cannot will it into making it happen. Just like I love Saint Teresa of Avila, she was whether she was levitating or she didn't levitate, but she always would say that she'd go down, sit in the chapel of the convent and sit there, and she could not make a transcendent experience, which she had many times happen. If it happened on its own, and the depth of it and the duration of it was completely out of her control. So even though I was retired for 25 years and want that more than anything else, it's sort of like, guess what? There's a lot of other heart's desires that I didn't realize that I had, that just, bubble up inside, that are stored in your mind body from either this life or past lives. And the whole thing has to be played out perfectly. So just surrender to it, be kind to yourself, let it happen. And, that's all I can really say.
That's crazy. How many businessmen are like, no. What's the formula? What's the program? How do I repeat what you did? And what you're saying is, well, if you're going to repeat what I did, surrender, meditate, and listen. I mean, that's right. That's right.
And one of the things I would say to these people all the time is like, to go from point A to point B. All right. And doing the business was completely different from going from A to B and B to C and C to D. And I never had, so many entrepreneurs, when they're starting something, they're like, this is my vision. This is the way that it needs to be for this thing to work. I know this is how I have to do it. My thing was completely opposite of that. I basically just sat there and said, okay, what do I need to do next? I mean, I literally, when the first company went public was in 1987, 3 months before the company went public, the stock market crashed. I think it was October 21st, 1987. And I had the underwriter who was taking the company public, and I called him up, and the stock market dropped like 20% in one day. And he goes, who would ever want to buy stock in your company? You'll be able to buy IBM for that same price like tomorrow with the way things are. And the deal got totally killed at that moment. And my reaction to that was like, oh, this is like interesting. It's like, what do I do? What do I do next? And sure enough, it's to do this and do that. The company ended up going public on February 12th from that was like October 21st. I was like, totally like, how the hell did you do that? I said, well, I didn't do it. And I never felt that I never felt that I was a doer. Okay, I was a good listener, a good meditator, and there was nothing. I don't think there's nothing I did in this lifetime to warrant that. I think it's just all my destiny of coming into this life with past desires or whatever, the manifestation just manifested the way it happened. It's not higher or lower than anybody else's. Any other manifestation is just as, it's all source is everything, and source is animating everything. So it's like, it's having a good time, whether it's a sweet little dog, right? Or if it's Elon Musk, it's having a good time, for the most part.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Marty, we could talk to you we have to talk to you again. We have to, follow up, because I knew this was going to be a really fun conversation. I love hearing your stories and your perspective, and your wisdom is, it's been such a treasure to know you and your lovely wife, Sarah, for so many years. And you both are an inspiration to me. And, I think about you both and your journeys as I'm traveling through mine. And, and it's always nice to know that you're both there too. Like for you, I've reached out to you many times, and it's just, yeah, there's something very calming and loving and confident about who you are.
Well, my one last desire is to write a book about transcendence and samadhi. So, and I said, you know what? I am not going to write that book unless I am having that real, legit experience to the extent that I had before. There's no sense writing. There's like 100 books that are out there. People are theoretically saying this is happening, that's happening, or whatever. It's like, it's not worth it. I mean, I don't need to do it because so many other people have done that. But if I can share something that's really worthwhile, or I can say that this is my perspective on how you can make it happen, because this is how it happened for me, then I'll do that. So that's my one last, 68 years old, my one last thing, if there's a heart's desire, is to do that or not. We'll
see what happens.
It might happen. And it's like, hey, source, if you want that, you want that to happen, great. But I'm open to it.
That's what I was saying. That's sort of where I'm at as well. And I think that I've learned that from you. That's one of the things I have learned, because I've been a big manifester my whole life and kind of bulldozed my way through it. And the last how many years? The last 10 years, I would say, I don't do that anymore. I sit back and I wait and I just move through it. And it's so much more graceful and easy. And I'm still learning how to do that. So, and that's how actually this podcast happened. And I'm writing a book right now called Turning Points. That just kind of came to me. I started writing during the quarantine and my spiritual turning points. And then I was talking to Sean about it one day and had this lightning bolt to do the podcast too. And it's just all been very effortless and easy and beautiful. Like we want, things to happen. So the first book you wrote was your memoirs. Is that correct?
Yeah. The first book that I wrote was my memoir, which has all these, I think there's 130 or 140 like 3-page chapters with all these individual stories chronologically of how that whole thing unfolded for me, which is that book, for whatever, it's only in hardback, on Amazon. You can't get that as an ebook, but then I have another ebook, which is sort of like a little bit of a synopsis of some of those things. And that's a free. You can basically get that book for free on Amazon. And a lot of people have, I think over the last 5 years, there was that free meditation book was like always like in the top 10 for free meditation books. But most of it is just like some of those stories. It's like the Soham experience or the Kundalini experience. And people love having somebody talk about it from a firsthand standpoint. So anyway.
Nice. Do you have it on audio too, or just both of
No.
those? No. Okay.
No.
Okay.
Oh, you should read that. You should read that audiobook. That'd be amazing.
I come out to San Diego, or maybe Sean and I'll both come out to San Diego. We'll record it with you, because that would be easy peasy, right?
As long as it's in the winter.
I wrote it 10 years ago, so it's sort of like I keep on thinking if I do this other book, I'll have to have what's the end, an epilogue at the very end, sort of like an update to.
Yeah.
So many years have passed since I wrote that, and Amazon said to me, well, there's a couple of photos that are in there that you just have to fix it's just like a computer thing that I got to do on it. But I don't look at my website. I never look at I get emails because I have an email thing on my website. People emailing me and asking me questions, which I do, but I never look at my website, and I don't do anything to promote any of those books in any way, shape, or form. So if people come to me like you guys are coming and saying, hey, do this podcast and do this, it's sort of like, it's a yes. I can do it. I can do that. I can do that. It's easy for me, But other than that, it's like I'm just having a good time meditating a lot. Well, it's getting juicier and juicier.
Yeah.
That's we need to. I mean, that's why we need to talk to you again, because I mean, it's incredibly helpful, and it's very insightful for people that are at whatever stage of their own coming into themselves, spiritual seeking, because I think it's one of those journeys that can feel alone. You can feel alone a lot of times, or without hope, or like you said, you get trapped in these depressive states of judgment and not knowing where to go. And so your stories, not just the stories, but the way you talk about them, and yes, this happened. Yes, this is the story. This is my experience. The lesson from that, which is to just love yourself and be forgiving with yourself. Having that on top of it is why I think it really settles some of the fire of self-doubt in a lot of people. So thank you very, very much for sharing and being vulnerable. There's a lot of stories that were pretty vulnerable, and that's something that we don't, I'll say this: men don't often share those very vulnerable experiences, and I think it's helpful and it's very healthy to have those out in the open and very casual.
You get I can't give you maybe I can send you a PDF of the file of the book so you can read it. But if you read that thing, there's talk about expose. I mean, when I started writing that thing, I just thought, okay, I'm not going to censor myself at all.
Yeah.
And I basically just wrote everything. And there's a lot of sexuality that's in there that's way maybe above and beyond anything that should have ever been put in there. And I remember Sarah, my wife, now coming out and reading the book and coming out into the living room and saying like, "Are you out of your fucking mind?" It's like, it's not going. And I think they pulled out like 10,000, 20,000 words that were in there. And then you read what's in there and going like, what the heck did he pull out of there? That's not in there. But I thought, the reason that I heard that it was good to do that was to share so much of all different, what was really happening with me.
Yeah.
What was really, I think it's just like so helpful to think like, well, you can have this experience and the next minute you're with a prostitute in Thailand doing this or that. So it's sort of like, it's helpful. It's really helpful.
Exactly. It is. It's embarrassing for people to listen to sometimes because of our own thing, whatever we have going on. And it's difficult to expose those parts of yourself. And that's part of the value in these conversations, and is giving it's like, no, this is not sugar coated. This is a real life experience, but then this is the real depth of the learning from that experience. And it's multidimensional, and it's rich, helpful, very much so.
Absolutely.
Well, it's good talking to you both, and you're probably going to set up another time to for us to do this again. So whenever that
We'll do
works for
it.
you guys, that'd be great.
Thank you so much,
Okay.
Marty. Talk
Okay.
soon. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for
Bye.
you. All right.
Well, welcome to the Say More. I have a lot and not a lot to say about that podcast because the one time again, kind of put me in awe. Those little experiences where you have them and they just kind of stun you. They put you into a moment of realization of truth, or an affirmation of truth, or just something that is, echoes your own experience.
You see truth in him.
Yeah.
Like you experience truth in him because he's just so authentic and loving and present and just open up to, this is my experience and what happened. And wow, what mystical stories though, right? I mean, I love that shit. That's why I'm writing the book. That's why, I was into the Yogananda book too. Have you ever read Autobiography of a Yogi?
No, I'm not well read at all, actually. But this is the third probably every podcast, talked about, coming.
It's a spiritual classic, right? That most people get to. And it's certainly one I read very early on in my spiritual journey, what made me want to go to India. And it was not for everybody, but there's a lot of mystical stories in that book. Yogananda starts off as an infant, but he's what's called an avatar, which means he remembers all of his lifetimes, even as an infant, right? Wow. So he's awake and enlightened of all of his lifetimes, fully awake when he's born. So most of us go through that ignorance, that veil of forgetfulness when we're born, and or so if that's your belief system, and we have to kind of not start over, but there's the veil of forgetfulness. So Yogananda starts off his book with being frustrated as an infant because he's an infant and he can't move his legs and doesn't have control. And he first leaves, tries to run away from home when he was like 8 years old, and finds his guru eventually when he's like 11 and goes and lives with him. And then it moves on from there to where he goes and meets these amazing yogis throughout northern India and in the Himalayas that are all magical. He meets a yogi that lives on only air and water, and that's it. And so doesn't eat. And then he meets a yogi that lives with the tigers, and he meets Babaji, who is who's been alive for thousands of years. And if you're meant to, he can either appear to you or you can meet him. And then he also met Jesus and a bunch of other guys in the Himalayas in the cave. So, it's very, very mystical. And so if you like mystical stories, some people are not that. That's not their nature. They don't want to hear about it. They don't want to, it doesn't resonate with them. But if you like mystical stories, you have to read Autobiography of a Yogi. And then, it really sparks your thirst for that kind of thing.
Yeah, and that is the way he kind of lives his life, that way, and that's what I found, Marty. That is, it's interesting that he was drawn to that book, later on in his life, because to a certain degree, it sounded like his childhood was a lot like that. Being drawn to enjoy. I don't know anybody that enjoys Catholic Church, even as a child. But even as adults, and that's not to say there's nothing to enjoy about Catholic Church. And I'm being biased. I'm not making fun of Catholics. I love you all, no problem. It's just there is an ominous to Catholicism. It feels, at least that's my experience. So that's my projection, anyways. There's a repentance and it almost feels like, a fear of God, a judgment of God, or being judged by God, and, this fear of hell. And it's even the portraits and everything is the Gothic churches. Gothic, it has this connotation. So as a child who, like he said, he's like, I loved it. I loved the rituals. I loved being a part of that. That's to me, that's unique. Maybe that's not as unique. I don't know.
Well,
Everybody.
beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I mean, I must say, I loved Catholic. Of course, I was only 4, but I loved the nuns.
Yes.
My dad hated the nuns. He had a terrible experience with the nuns in the 1930s. He had to go live at this convent with his brothers and sisters during the Depression, and the nuns were very cruel to him. So he's always, had an aversion to that. I, on the other hand, walked into Catholic school when I was 4 and fell in love with the nuns. Couldn't wait to go to school every day. Wanted to go to church all the time until I didn't, until I had that experience of seeing the dead body in church. But so when you describe it, I was just thinking, wow, the way you're describing it wasn't my experience. So,
Exactly. Well,
yeah.
and that's not been my experience either. It's and this kind of is the point of programming. I have only like 2 experiences with Catholic Church, and one of them was my brother's wedding. That was an awesome experience. So I'm completely projecting from a bias of program belief about what that is about, because I do know people that do enjoy that spiritual religion, doing that spiritual ritual, that expression of their spiritual beliefs. So, but what is interesting is he was very aware and very present to that experience as a young child. And you seldom hear that the adults took the child out of Catholic Church because of experience that the parents were afraid of, that had nothing to do with Catholicism. Really, it was a very natural process of young love and no big deal, and so that's a very interesting way to start your life. But it's also very interesting that he didn't rebel against that. Marty doesn't seem like the guy to rebel against whatever's in front of him. It's okay, that's what's in front of me. Well, that's what's in front of me, and that's what direction I go. That level of surrender, he seemed to be attracted to that kind of surrender, and that the Kundalini experience. And what I think I love is the duality of, yes, that's a mystical experience of Kundalini, 2.5 hours of this surging through your body and to this pure bliss, but then the very vulnerable and real acknowledgement of the fear that he had towards the end of that, the terrifying realization that if I continue, this is going to kill me and I'm not going to be able to have this experience in life anymore. That contrast is very, very important, I think, because I think we get attached and we can get caught up in the mystical, right? The mystical stories that the way that go, we get attached to that and we believe and we get programmed to think that the only way to achieve that enlightenment is through a mystical experience. Sometimes, yes. A lot of times, no. It's a very unique path, and that's what I love. Some of his stories of, I can't remember. I have terrible memory of name. Whoever was it Muktananda?
Yeah, his guru was Muktananda. Yeah,
guru describing it of like, well, yeah, I had 1,000 of these experiences, but now I'm bringing that blissful awareness into full body experience. And it's like you're talking about the bliss envy that we get. It's like, oh, I'm envious of the bliss you have, because if I had that bliss, then I would get to the enlightenment. And it doesn't seem to work that way. It doesn't. It is a path to enlightenment, but it is not the only path to enlightenment.
Yeah, and it's not. In fact, it like you said, sometimes it can be a big block.
Yes.
I mean, it certainly was for me, because I had a tendency for sort of mystical experiences early on in my journey as well.
Yeah.
And I tended to, what happens is you get stuck and you look for that same experience. And then it's kind of the same thing as, is you're limiting yourself. If you're looking for the same experience you had in anything, you're limiting yourself to the infinity amount of experience you can have. Right. So you got to let go of those things. And ultimately they're just, they're not they're just experiences that come and go. And that's what the teaching is. Anything that comes and goes is not it. Anything that comes and goes is experience.
Yes.
And what remains is what it is, the truth.
It is what it is. It is what it is. Well, and that's why I think you can point to awareness. There's an awareness that you can carry. I don't know if you can call awareness permanent. It is awareness unchanging.
Yeah, awareness is permanent and unchanging.
There you
but
go.
Our awareness of awareness is not, it's like our
Yes.
conscious awareness of that. And I wanted to say too, when Marty had that experience of stopping it, like throwing himself off the couch because he thought he was going to die, that is not very common, but it is it can be a common experience with it's the experience of the death of the ego. Ramana describes it the same way. Ramana Maharshi, that he mentioned several times, described, laying on the floor and thinking he was going to die. Like he was fully thinking he was going to die. And it was the death of the ego. Byron Katie, same thing. Eckhart Tolle, same thing. It does. And Adyashanti's talked about it too. He says people think they want the truth and they think they want to wake up. But when it starts to happen and there's this annihilation of the ego and annihilation of everything you've ever known about yourself and your identity, that's what usually stops it from happening.
Yeah. What and more to say more about that. I think what's the double down cool thing about it is that I think it would be very easy to have regret. And that's why I kind of asked him that question, because for me, I would have regret about, well, do you regret not going to that final, letting yourself die? And that's when he goes into, no, I don't regret that. That was the next step, and then he says,
I think he did regret it at first. He did, because he said he beat himself up for a while.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's when he learned to love himself and surrender and accept. Yeah.
Yes. So the lesson from that, even though it takes time, the lesson that comes out of that is you forgive yourself for that. Because I mean, that happened. He was terrifyingly blissful, and he had to abandon that process of death because he knew that he was going to die if he continued on to that, or in the moment. And so he left that state. And that, again, like it's so, when you say the ego is sticky, these patterns are sticky, the programming is sticky, it's the perfect word. It's like Velcro that you keep like trying to wiggle out of, but it's like, well, if you go this way, it's going to still get attached to, and it's very easy to look back on these experiences, said, well, I would have reached enlightenment had I not stopped myself from going to that. And that's regret. Now you're devolving back down. And that's why the forgiveness in all the experiences that you think or can convince yourself wasn't the right thing. Well, God damn it, it happened. So you can't go back and change that experience. And we were just, before the podcast, we were talking about that as, conversation you had with Don Oakley, who we talked to. Oh, did I say it? Don Oakley?
Yep.
Yeah, thank God. Normally I'm terrible with that. Was the extra story that comes in our experiences, right? And you said well, it's cold outside. I want to be comfortable. It all comes, this extra story is a program that we're always seeking to find comfort. We want comfortability for ourselves. And this extra minutia, the stories and that surround us just being in whatever is that stickiness of the ego. It's telling us and trying to convince us that there's more to the already profound moment that is right in front of you. When really all you're doing is distracting yourself from being in that profound already moment that is right in front of you.
You hit the nail on the head right there. That's it.
That's it.
That's it.
And that's why what kind of spirals me out and why I shut down when we get to that point, that story that just kind of stunned me, is because I realized I was asking him the question of, do you regret that? Because I know I would. And then I go, oh shit, I shouldn't have asked him that. That's a dumb question. It's like, well, no, it's not a dumb question. It's a very real, and it's like, now I'm spiraling out, right? That's the story that you've watched me spiral out of that, plenty of times when we talk about, and that's the spiraling out of, just fucking be, man, and just, I think meditation is that great tool to keep you in that state of being. Whatever is. But it is hard.
Yeah.
And it is, go ahead.
Yeah. No. I mean, I think it is hard. I was just saying, but it is our natural state. Our natural state is to be in the present. Well, we can't ever not be in the present moment, but we can be very, very distracted and thinking, multitasking. Oh, I have to sneeze. Excuse me.
Bless you.
And yeah, I mean, I think what's hard is that we have a very undisciplined mind. That's the hard part. We believe our thoughts, and we all have squirrel minds, that run back and forth all the time. And they're just basically very undisciplined. And mostly it's because most people are not aware of the constant conversation that's happening, the debate that's happening in their skull at all times, even as you're falling asleep and as you wake up. When you're in the shower, you're thinking about 2,500 different things instead of just showering.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that alone. And all you're doing is having a debate with yourself, a conversation with yourself in your head. And that's keeping you from being present. So it's there for us to be present, but we are choosing because we unconsciously believe that what we're thinking about in our heads is more enjoyable and more real than the present moment. And it's because we're constantly self-soothing with our thoughts because we're coming up with solutions that we like. Of different, we come to a solution. Well, maybe I'll meet my friend today and I'll wear this, and then maybe I'll wear this instead, and then maybe we'll go to this restaurant, and then you land on something that's soothing, that feels good.
Yes.
And we don't like it when we've got negative thoughts that are constantly going, but the only reason why they're negative is because you believe them.
Yes. Yeah. And that was happening sometimes within the conversation, and then other times it was just, fully drawn in. And that's what's cool is having been disciplined regimentally, having a regiment of discipline over a period of time now. And we were talking about this again before the podcast, where I said, I think I can't remember exactly, but I was talking about there's not new hurdles. There's just more of the same hurdles. And I've been thinking about this because I think for a long time, while the seeking process, I was searching for a thing or an experience or a way of life or fill in the blank of that was going to give me fulfillment. And this new year, this year has been a lot of reflection, and we've talked about that a bit, privately and on, podcasts. And this year has been a conscious awakening, on a mass global social level. And this just I came to realize this, kind of the new year, as the start of the year, reflecting and, I did not project much into this year. I don't have this long-term, how I want the year to go. There's just things that are already set in motion that I'm going to continue on. And if something comes up, I will do that. It's been very letting go, very surrendering. And so when I say that there's nothing new to uncover, because I think my system even knows that I have found contentment and I have found fulfillment. That's not to say I don't know if that's an enlightenment necessarily, but I do know that I found the fulfillment and the contentment I had been looking for. So now I guess the practice is on bringing that into everyday life and being more present and not having all this extra. So the practice is now just being on guard of myself, is when am I in now and when am I in programmed fear or distraction. I just don't know that there's going to be what could bring me more fulfillment than I've already had is the question. And the ego doesn't have a good answer for there's no, this is your money's gonna. It's like, well, fuck, I don't know, maybe, probably not, But then also sorry, I'm now I'm gonna ramble on.
No.
Because the identity too, I've been really struggling with the identity question, because every time it's like, well, who am I? Who am I really? It's like, I don't really know how to answer that. I know how to give you patterns to point to, things that I tend to do, but I'm not really any of those things. Obviously, I'm a father now. I will be a father forever. Those things.
It's a role.
Yes.
It's a role that you're playing because you're not a father in this moment.
Correct. I'm not being a father right now.
No. And so they're just different roles that we play. The question, who am I, is try to find the I.
Right. Yeah, that's been rattling around up there for a long time. It's like, I don't know, and there's been, I think it was Werner and Roger, because I went back and was re-editing some of those podcasts with the new intros, and there's these little nuggets of consistency and these. It's like I don't know what the fuck is doing this really, and I think I actually think Marty had a really good, spirit is manifesting this and animating it at the same time. I really like that way of putting it. I think that reinforces kind of some of the other conversations. Like, I don't know. You think I'm in control? And that's what I think I've given my wife and I, we struggle with that probably the most is like, well, you got this, right? And like, I don't know. I'm a leaf in the fucking wind, man. I always kind of have been. I'm just going to give you a facade of structure and control that I don't really have, it's not really my thing. And in a lot of ways I feel, at peace knowing that a large majority of my time has been spent as a tumbleweed, in a lot of ways, surrendering to the wave. And the biggest part of my struggle is when I'm afraid to trust in what's being guided to me. That fear that struggle of not following the whim of, spirit, that's when I really struggle the most. I know that. I don't know how to tell other people that. I don't know how to give my wife confidence that, no, it's going to be okay. Because that's not what I'm being told, right? That's not what Spirit doesn't tell you. You're going to be okay. Spirit says, do this. Spirit says, go that. That's the gravity going that way. There's no, you'll be fine.
And that's her journey.
And that's her journey. Yeah.
That's her journey to, your journey is how you feel about it and how you communicate it and how you trust even how she takes it and don't try
Yeah.
to take on her process.
Yes. Well, and that has been our process for a long time. And it's funny, we just, our paths have recently merged, where she's more on the path of like, I'm not going to sit here and worry. She's worrying a lot less. You know, it's, I think our whole life and our coming up to Wisconsin, moved back by family, and it was all to fit an idea that she had in her mind, and none of that's worked out. Not that our life hasn't worked out, but it hasn't worked out to be that projection. It's, in a way, I think there was a depression and a letdown of like, well, this is not at all what I thought it was going to be. But when you refocus on, but I have everything that I could possibly want, I have everything I need, it doesn't have to look like what I projected it to look like. That's when she started to kind of shift and our paths merged more, where it's like, our world is small in a lot of ways right now because we have 3 kids, we have a house, we have animals, we have responsibilities. It's like, this is all we can manage right now. We can't take on all this other shit that is no way controllable anyways. And so our life is very much like, okay, move this. And then me letting go of that mystical journey of, well, I got to find my mystical journey. And it's like, well, fuck, I've lived a lot of experiences and I've had some really profound events in my life. As you were a part of some of them and heard about all the rest of them most likely. And those are not my favorite moments per se. My favorite moments are the small one-on-ones of the unexpected moments. The moments that, if you tell a story about, don't seem that profound. But in the moment, they were the most profound. And you can only share that with maybe the 1 or 2 people that you were with in those moments. But the treasure is what we share together in that awareness, in that experience, not the experience. It's not the Kundalini, it's the learning after the fact. It's the integrating that bliss into life. That's where the treasure lies, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying it a lot the last couple of years. Your life is your lesson. Your life is your journey. Your life is your awakening. We're given the exact amount, and Marty said it too. We're given exactly what we need to wake up and to have the experience that we came here to have. It's all spirit moving through us, and there's nothing we can do about it. We can either struggle, we can hang on for dear life, we can fight against it, or we can surrender, and there's 1,000 other ways to do it too.
Yeah. And I think the letting go is letting go of the how and the when we think that will unfold.
Yeah. Surrender, all of us. Surrender doesn't mean just surrender in one way.
Yeah.
It means surrender in all ways.
Yes. Yeah.
Doesn't mean just surrender to, your career.
Nope. It's always. And that was Patty, man. That was her story of like, and take this too,
take my non-struggle.
Take my non-struggle and take that too. Fuck. Big shit, man.
Yeah.
Big stuff.
Another good one.
Yeah, man. What a way to kick off 2021, which so far, day 4, been pretty fucking spectacular. Cross fingers, knock on wood. It's been awesome. So
good.
And next week we get to talk to Sarah.
To Sarah, Marty's wife.
Marty's wife.
Mm-hmm.
Probably see the same kitchen.
Yeah. She usually speaks on Zoom from her office, though. So we'll see.
Well, that'll be awesome. I can't wait.
Yeah. All right. Love ya.
Thank you. Love you too.
Bye.